Well, as expected, that wasn't super helpful. After all, it only gave me like 10 cards, and a deck core is how many cards again? I think that's open to interpretation. I also think it's more than 10, but that's what we're going to do today. We're going to try to get to the core of a Kinnan list. I find deck cores to be useful for two big reasons. One, if you're trying to build the deck for yourself and you don't want to just one-for-one net deck somebody else, cores give you a good idea of the cards that you don't want to be cutting or forgetting about. It can be a little embarrassing to show up to your locals. You're the only Kinnan player that forgot Birds of Paradise existed in the deck building process. It also gives you an idea of how much room you responsibly have to add your own flair to the deck, throw in packages, the big creature that you like, whatever. Two, in a closed deck list environment like a tournament, it gives you an idea of what to reasonably expect from your opponent. If you let your local Kinnan player completely warp your idea of what Kinnan looks like, you can get caught off guard if they're playing a substandard list. And there is value in playing substandard lists. You know, circumnavigating expectations, adding your own flair onto the deck, dismantling cores is how we really get big innovations. Today I don't give a shit about any of that. Today I just want to find the core, and to do that I took a look at 100 Kinnan lists. So first things first, I had to get 100 Kinnan lists. So I went to edhtop16.com, which is sort of my preferred cEDH resource right now, and I'm looking for Kinnan Bonder Prodigy decks from the last 6 months, which is sort of just the arbitrary cutoff point that I've decided. It's pretty recent. There haven't been any major format shifts. This is like right after Lost Caverns of Ixalan came out, and I'm looking at tournaments with 32 or more players. In a perfect world, we could look at 64 plus, but cEDH is too small. You just don't really have enough data if you're limiting yourself to just those kinds of tournaments, and this is going to give us 133 top 16 decks to look at, so we're going to be looking at most of the top 16 Kinnan lists from the last 6 months. So we click into this, and then I go through, and in a notepad, I manually write down 100 of these. No, I'm just fucking with you. So we click into one of these, we go ahead and hit the download button, copy for MTGO, we go to a blank spreadsheet, we paste that in there, and as you can see, it comes out real nice. That I do manually 100 times, because I need to troubleshoot a little bit. It only takes about 40 minutes. Then we go through, and we just, delete all of the one spaces so that we get just this nice list of cards. Once I had all 100 lists, I pasted them into a text document in Python and then wrote a little bit of code. This opens up that text document and turns each card into an item in a list. This then opens up a blank dictionary and fills it with the contents of that list, turning each card name into a key and the amount of times it appears into a value. This sorts that dictionary in descending order based off of the value, and then this takes all of that and pastes it into a new text document, which looks like this. So as we can see here, we have the card name and then how many times it appears in those 100 decks. Island and Forest are a little high because I tried to be too smart and ended up... don't worry about this. I compensated for it. But as we can see here, we have card names and how many times they appeared, and because this is a singleton format, that tells us how many times a player brought it. I then took that data, pasted it back into a Google Sheet, ran some manual analysis on it, and put together this chart, which I do have a pretty version of, but I was afraid that it was going to be too hard to read. The chart works like this. This total column represents the 265 unique cards represented across all 100 deck lists, broken down by card type. The same is true for cards played in 90 or more lists, 75 or more lists, and 50 or more lists. When we look at the 50 or more lists, you'll notice that there are actually 98 cards present, which is just one shy of being a fully functioning deck. Shout out Wooded Foothills for only coming in at 49 of those decks, which feels like more than a core to me. Going into this, I kind of assumed that 75 is about where we would find a core, and 82 is a number that I'm pretty happy with to call a core. But again, the cool thing about data is that it is open to interpretation. If you want to use the 90 as a core, if you only want a 64 card core, you are more than welcome to do that. But for the remainder of this video, I will be referring to these 82 cards played by 75 or more of the players as the Kinnan core. And finally, to really drive the point home, I took the 82 cards played by 75% of Kinnan players and put them in Mox Field so that we could get a good visual representation of what the core of the deck was. We have Invasion of Ikoria, Tezzeret, getting down into the creatures. It's your sort of standard one-drop package, what you'd come to expect. The things that I want to shout out here is things that you need to be cognizant of when playing against Kinnan, that 96 of them ran Gilded Drake, 88 of them ran Endurance, and of course the bomb package. When you're wondering what's the absolute worst thing that could happen off of this Kinnan flip, these are the cards that 75% of Kinnan players are running as their bomb package, at least from the last 6 months in the top 16. And then we get down into sorceries. It's pretty light down here. Instance is nothing to write home about. It's just 10 counter spells, and then Worldly Tutor, Chord of Calling, and Cyclonic Rift. You probably could have guessed that these were in the deck.
Artifacts, again, nothing crazy, just a lot of fast mana, a couple of combo pieces, you know, Basalt Monolith and Mirage Mirror and all that. One Ring was actually in 100% of the Kinnan lists, which is a little unsurprising given some of the artifact utility that they run. That Mystic Remore and Rhystic Study, who could have guessed? And then 21 lands. You know, nothing really crazy to write home about here. And then to just kind of go a little bit further, this sideboard, these 16 cards are the 16 card difference between 50% of Kinnan players and 75% of Kinnan players. So like I mentioned, 50% of Kinnan players agree on 98 cards, in which case these are what you would add to the deck to really round it out. I don't know if this puts you at the ideal ratios of lands and creatures and artifacts and whatnot, but these are just the additional things that are going to come in. So like Thorn Mammoth and Perplexing Chimera, you know, relatively popular in terms of things that are getting added to the bomb package, but they're not in every Kinnan list by any stretch of the imagination. Another Mana Dork, some more removal, just some utility lands like Homeward Path and Emergent Zone, Crop Rotation. Trinisphere, a big one. So this is not in, you know, 75% of Kinnan lists. I think this was much closer to the 50 mark. It was like 53 for Trinisphere. So it's not necessarily something that you need to expect coming out of a Kinnan deck, but be very aware that it is in the deck more often than not. It's a very real possibility. Slam your rocks on the table before you get hit with the Trinisphere.
So that was a Kinnan Core. Nobody's recommending that you take the 98 cards that 50 plus Kinnan players play, plus Wooded Foothills, throw that into your deck and call it a day. But putting those 99 cards in Moxfield, working backwards from there, it's not a bad way to begin the deck building process. After all, you have to go off script, right? These are all top 16 Kinnan lists, and there were still 56 cards that were only played in one deck. And just because you don't play Kinnan doesn't mean that it's not important for you to know the core. You don't want your entire concept of a deck warped by your one local player. Just because your local Kinnan player plays Apex Altasaur and beats you over the head with it every week doesn't mean every Kinnan deck is playing Apex Altasaur. The more you know about a deck, the more you understand it, the less frightening it becomes. The less you answer, I don't know, if people ask you, what's coming next? Politicking is always going to be an important part of cEDH, and it's a lot easier to get everybody on board with you if you can confidently and clearly explain the lines of a deck because you understand the core, you know what's coming next. You don't go, yeah, this is vaguely threatening, I don't really know what they're going to do here, but it probably kills us. It's a lot easier if you can confidently say, yes, they will get this, 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 and kill us, or actually, they can't do this and they can't actually kill us. It's important for threat assessment to understand what your opponents are playing. Now, this was a good amount of fun for me. So if let me know in the comments if there's anything that you would have liked to see a little bit more of, something you want me to touch on that I didn't, so that I can make analyzing cEDH just a little bit cooler for all of us. Thanks.